Get our class started this evening. We've got a lot of material to cover. Getting a little bit of a later start. First of all, there's no slides for tonight. Sorry. Right now, all my spare time is focused around moving because we're moving from Anchorage up to Chugiak. And it's a little bit challenging, so eating up a lot of my time. But last week we talked about the existence of God with cause and effect. This is awfully hot. And we talked about how one of the most basic issues that the human mind can consider is the question, does God exist? Either God exists, and now it's off. Now it's back. We'll try this again. Either God exists or he does not. There is no middle ground. The atheist boldly states that God does not exist, while the theist states just as boldly that he does exist. The agnostic says that there is not enough evidence to make a decision on the matter. And the skeptic doubts that God's existence can be proven with certainty. So we talked about some of the laws of science that we went back to talk about science, not to say that science necessarily proves that God exists, but to use the same laws that scientists love to use to prove everything else that they want to prove, and point out that they can't just turn those laws off when they're talking about the creation of the universe. And in that, we started talking about the laws of thermodynamics and all kinds of things. And that's where we're kind of wanted to pick up tonight, is to follow up on that. And then we're actually going to get into talking about the does God exist, and looking at what is the term? I can't think of the word right now. The design of the universe, and how that couldn't have been just accidental. But when we were talking about the rules of thermodynamics and things like that, we talked about the principle of conservation of matter and energy, which states that matter and energy can be neither created or destroyed. Matter can be converted into energy or vice versa, but the total amount of matter and energy in the universe must remain unchanged forever. This is a widely accepted scientific law. Furthermore, science is based on observation, reproducibility, and empirical data. But when pressed for the empirical data that document the claim that the universe created itself from nothing, unbelievers are forced to admit that no such evidence exists. The universe did not create itself. Such an idea is absurd both philosophically and scientifically. So we talked about how either the universe had a beginning or it did not. But all available evidence indicates that the universe did in fact have a beginning. If the universe had a beginning, it either had a cause or it did not. One thing we know for sure, however, it is correct, logically and scientifically, to acknowledge that the universe did have a cause, because the universe is an effect, and as such, it requires an adequate cause. Cause and effect states that wherever there is a material effect, there must be an adequate antecedent cause. Further indicated, however, is the fact that no effect can be greater than its cause. Since it is obvious that the universe is not eternal, And since it is also obvious that the universe could not have created itself, the only remaining alternative is that the universe was created by something or someone that existed before it, that is, some eternal, uncaused first cause, is superior to it, since the created cannot be superior to the Creator, and is of a different nature, since the finite, dependent universe of matter is unable to explain itself. But in connection with this, another fact should be considered. If there ever had been a time when absolutely nothing existed, then there would be nothing now. Because it is always as true that nothing produces nothing. In view of this, since something exists now, it must follow logically that something has existed forever. Everything that humans know to exist can be classified as either matter or as mind. There is no third alternative. So the argument then is that everything that exists is either matter or mind. Something exists now, so something eternal exists. Therefore, either matter or mind is eternal. In the past, atheistic evolutionists suggested that the mind is nothing more than a function of the brain, which is matter. Thus, the mind and the brain are the same, and matter is all that exists. However, that viewpoint no longer is credible scientifically, due in large part to the experiments of the renowned Austrian physiologist Sir John Eccles. Dr. Eccles, who won the Nobel Prize for his discoveries regarding how certain portions, known as neurosynapses, of the brain work, he documented that the mind is more than merely physical. He showed that the supplementary motor area of the brain may be fired by the mere intention to do something, without the motor cortex, which controls muscle movements, operating. In effect, the mind is to the brain what a librarian is to the library. The librarian is not reducible to the latter, the library. And so Eccles explained his scientific methodology and his conclusions in The Self and Its Brain, a book he co-authored with eminent British philosopher of science Sir Karl Popper. So, using scientifically, then the choice is between matter only and more than matter as the explanation for the existence of the orderliness of the universe. The difference, therefore, between the two models is the difference between, on one side, you have time, chance, and the natural properties of matter, or on the other hand, you have design, creation, and the undeniable properties of organization and mind. In fact, when it comes to any particular case, there are only two scientific explanations for the origin of the order of the universe and of the life in the universe. Either the order was imposed upon matter, or it naturally resides within the matter. To those who are willing to suggest that order resides naturally within matter, we can respond simply by saying that we certainly have not seen any evidence of such. And furthermore, the scientific and philosophical evidence that we do possess speaks loudly and clearly to the existence of an independent, eternal, self-existent mind that created this universe and everything within it. But try as they might, skeptics, they're unable to avoid the obvious implications of the law of cause and effect. But it hasn't stopped them from trying. And they have leveled countless arguments against it. For example, one such argument insists that the idea must be false because it is inconsistent with itself. The argument kind of goes something like this. The principle of cause and effect says that everything must have a cause. On this concept, it then traces all things back to a first cause, where it suddenly stops. But how may it do so and remain consistent? Why does the principle that everything needs a cause suddenly cease to be true? Why is it that this so-called first cause does not likewise need some kind of cause? If everything else needs an explanation or a cause, why does this first cause also not need an explanation or a cause? And if this first cause does not need an explanation, why then do all other things need an explanation? So, in response to that, we can offer two different responses. And that is, first, it is absolutely impossible, logically, to defend any concept of infinite regress that suggests an endless series of effects with no ultimate first cause. Philosophers they've argued this point correctly for generations. Whatever begins to exist must have a first cause, or a cause. Nothing causeless happens. Second, the complaint offered by unbelievers suggesting that the law of causality is inconsistent with itself, it's not a valid objection against the law. Rather, it is an objection to an incorrect statement of that law. If someone were to say everything must have a cause, then the objection might be valid. But this is not what the law of causality says. It states that every material effect must have an adequate antecedent cause. Ultimately, at some point in the distant past, there must have been a pure first cause that is non-material in nature. The law of cause and effect and the cosmological argument based upon that law, it has implications in every area of human life. The universe is here, and therefore must have an adequate antecedent cause. To illustrate the law of cause and effect, one scientist referred to the following historical event. Some years ago, scientists were called to Great Britain to study orderly patterns of concentric rocks and holes. An archaeological find eventually designated as Stonehenge. As studies progressed, it became quite apparent that these patterns had been designed specifically for the purpose of allowing a variety of astronomical predictions. Many questions, for example, how ancient peoples were able to construct an astronomical observatory, how the data resulting from their studies were used, and others, they remain unsolved. But one thing we know with certainty: this cause of Stonehenge was intelligent design. Now, if we compare Stonehenge to the situation paralleling the origin of the universe and of life itself, we study life, we observe its functions, contemplate its complexity, which highly intelligent men and women cannot duplicate, even using the most advanced scientific methods and technology. And what are we to conclude? True, Stonehenge might have been produced by the erosion of a mountain or by catastrophic natural forces working in conjunction with meteorites to produce rock formations and concentric holes. But what scientist or philosopher would ever suggest such an idea? No one in his right mind could be convinced that Stonehenge just happened by accident. Yet, atheists, agnostics, and skeptics expect us to believe that this highly ordered, well-designed universe and the complicated life it contains, that just happened. To accept such an idea is irrational because the conclusion is unreasonable, it is unwarranted, and unsupported by the facts at hand. The cause simply is not adequate to produce the effect. This type of reasoning applies not only to the universe, but also to those of us who inhabit it. We possess certain undeniable traits: the ability to reason, the ability to know, the ability to act rationally. But what is the origin of such critically important traits? The theory of evolution certainly has no adequate answer. As philosopher Norman Geisler put it, the cause cannot give what it does not have to give. If my mind or ability to know is received, then there must be a mind or knower who gave it to me. The intellectual does not arise from the non-intellectual. Something cannot arise from nothing. And Dr. Geisler is absolutely correct. If we as humans possess the ability to reason, or the capability to reason, then there must be an adequate cause standing behind that capability, a cause that possesses the ability to reason. If we as humans possess the capability to know, for example, there is an intellectual as well as a physical side to our makeup, then there must be an adequate cause standing behind that capability. An intellectual cause that possesses the ability to know. If we as humans possess the capability to act rationally, then there must be an adequate cause standing behind that capability. Simply put, the central message of the cosmological argument and the law of cause and effect upon which it is based is this: every material effect must have an adequate cause that came before it. The universe is here. Intelligent life is here. Morality is here. Ethics is here. Love is here. What is their adequate antecedent cause? Since the effect can never come before or be greater than the cause, then it stands to reason that the cause of life must be living must be a living intelligence that itself is moral, ethical, and loving. When the Bible records, "In the beginning, God," it makes known just such a first clause. Did I say cause or a clause? So many causes. But now we're going to actually get more into the design. One of the laws of thought used in the field of logic is the law of rationality. And this law states that a person should accept as true only those conclusions for which there is adequate evidence. And this makes good sense, because a person who accepts conclusions for which there is no evidence or inadequate evidence would be irrational. In discussing the case for God's existence, theists use logic, clear reasoning, and factual data to present arguments that are adequate to justify the conclusion that God exists. The evidence used to prove the theist's position concerning God's existence may take many forms. The different arguments presented by theists all combined make an extremely strong and irrefutable case for God's existence. Take as a whole, the evidence is adequate to justify the conclusion that God exists, taken as a whole. And as we move into this tonight, we're going to look into more of the evidence that proves it. In order to prove the existence of God, theists often use what is known as teleological argument. Teleology is a word that refers to a purpose or design. Thus, this approach suggests that where there is design, there must be a designer. In logical form, the argument may be presented as follows. If the universe shows evidence of design, it must have had a designer. Okay, the universe does show evidence of design, thus the universe must have had a designer. This correct form of logical reasoning and the implications that flow from it have not escaped the attention of those who do not believe in God. Even unbelievers understand that one does not get a poem without a poet, or a law without a lawgiver, a painting without a painter, or a design without a designer. However, even though many unbelievers admit that design demands a designer, they deny that there is any design in nature sufficient to establish the existence of a great designer. This disagreement between the person who believes in God and the person who does not has nothing whatsoever to do with whether design demands a designer. Rather, the point of contention is whether or not there is design in nature adequate to prove the conclusion that a designer does exist. So, our universe operates using exact scientific laws. The precision of the universe and the exactness of these laws allows scientists to launch rockets to the moon with full knowledge that they will land within a few feet of their intended target. Such precision and exactness also allows astronomers to predict eclipses many years before they happen, or to determine when Halley's Comet will be visible again. The precision, the complexity, the orderliness within the universe are not in dispute. But while atheists willingly admit that there is complexity and even order, they are not prepared to say that there is a design, because they know that purposeful design demands a designer. So, is there evidence of a design? The atheist claims that no such evidence exists. The theist, however, says that there is evidence of design and can offer all kinds of examples of it. We all recognize this, we live in a tremendously large universe. While its outer limits have yet to be measured, it is estimated to be as much as 20 billion light years in diameter. A light year is the distance that light travels in 1 year, moving at the speed of over 186,000 miles per second. It's a wide space. There are an estimated 1 billion galaxies in the universe, and an estimated 25 sextillion stars. The Milky Way galaxy in which we live contains over 100 billion stars and is so large that even moving at the speed of light, it would require 100,000 years to travel across it. If we drew a map of the Milky Way galaxy where we live and represented the Earth and Sun as 2 dots 1 inch apart, thus the scale of 1 inch equals 93 million miles, we would need a map at least 4 miles wide to locate the next nearest star, and a map 25,000 miles wide to reach the center of our galaxy. Without a doubt, this is a rather impressive universe. While the size itself is impressive, its design is even more impressive. The temperature inside the sun is estimated to be over 20 million degrees Celsius. The Earth, however, is located exactly the correct distance from the sun to receive the proper amount of heat and radiation to sustain life as we know it. If the Earth were moved just 10% closer to the sun, about 10 million miles, far too much heat and radiation would be absorbed. If the Earth were moved just 10% further away from the sun, too little heat would be available. Either situation would spell doom for life on Earth. Continuing this theme, the Earth it's rotating on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, and simultaneously moving around the sun at 70,000 miles per hour, or approximately 19 miles per second. While the sun and its solar system are whirling through space at 600,000 miles per hour in an orbit so large that it has been estimated it will take over 220 million years just to complete a single orbit. Didn't know you were coming to science class tonight, did you? Interestingly, however, as the Earth moves in its orbit around the sun, it departs from a straight line by only 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles. If it departed by 1/8 of an inch, we would come so near to the sun that we would be incinerated. If it departed by 1/10 of an inch, we would find ourselves so far from the sun that we would freeze to death. The Earth is about 240,000 miles from the moon, whose gravitational pull produces ocean tides. If the moon were moved any closer to the Earth, say by just 1/5, the tides would be so enormous that twice a day there would be a 35 to 50-foot wall of water over most of the Earth's surface. But what would happen if the rotation of the Earth were cut in half or doubled? If it were halved, the seasons would be doubled in length, which would cause such harsh heat and cold over much of the Earth that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to grow enough food to feed the Earth's population. If the rotation rate were doubled, the length of each season would be halved, causing the same kind of potential food shortage. The Earth is tilted on its axis exactly 23.5 degrees. If that tilt were reduced to zero, much of the Earth's water would accumulate around the two poles, leaving vast deserts in their place. If the atmosphere surrounding the Earth were much thinner, meteorites could strike our planet with greater force and frequency. The oceans provide a huge reservoir of moisture that moisture is constantly evaporating and condensing, thus falling upon the land as refreshing rain. It is well known and recognizes the fact that water heats and cools much slower than the solid land masses, which explains why desert regions can be blistering hot in the daytime and yet freezing cold at night. Water, however, holds its temperature longer and provides a sort of natural heating or air conditioning system for the land areas of the Earth. Temperature extremes would be much more unpredictable than they are now if approximately 4/5 of the Earth's surface was not covered with water. In addition, humans and animals inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. On the other hand, plants take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. We depend on plants for our oxygen supply, yet we often fail to realize that almost 90% of our oxygen comes from tiny plants in the sea. So if our oceans were much smaller, we soon would be without air to breathe. Can a person reasonably be expected to believe that these exacting requirements for life as we know it could have been met by accident? And this is not trying to point out that this is necessarily a scientific fact, that the universe is as big as they say it is and all this other stuff, whether that's fact or not. But the point is, this is using science, what scientists believe to be absolute truth, pointing out how, using their numbers, how could this have happened by chance? The Earth is exactly the right distance from the sun. It is exactly the right distance from the moon. It has exactly the right diameter. It has exactly the right atmospheric pressure. It has the exact right tilt. It has exactly the right amount of oceanic water, the exact right amount of weight and mass, and so on. If this many requirements were met in any other area of life, the idea that had been provided just by accident would be dismissed immediately as ludicrous. Yet some people still suggest that the universe, the Earth, and life on Earth are all here as a result of a lucky accident. Several years ago, in Science Digest magazine, world-renowned physicist John Gribben published an article that stressed the importance of facts like the ones just mentioned. Yet, he labeled his article, Earth's Lucky Break. The famous British astronomer, Sir Fred Hoyle, however, has suggested that the idea of randomness and disorder somehow give rise to design and order is like saying a tornado could sweep through a junkyard and assemble a Boeing 747 all from the scraps. The statistical improbability of the universe just happening, it's staggering. The only alternative is that it was created by an intelligent designer, that it was created by God. Many years ago, the ancient scholar Augustine observed that men go abroad to wonder at the height of mountains, at the huge waves of the sea, at the long course of the rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motion of the stars, and they pass by themselves without wondering. Indeed, while we stand in amazement at so many stunning scenes from our unique universe, and even just within this beautiful state here, we often fail to stand amazed at the marvelous creation that actually is the human body. According to those who do not believe in God, the human body is the result of a set of lucky circumstances set in motion by those mythical parents, Father Time and Mother Nature. Yet this suggestion does not fit the actual facts of the case. Can a person reasonably be expected to conclude that the masterpiece of the human body, with its ingenious systems and amazing design, is a result of blind chance, operating over millions of years in nature, as atheism suggests? Or would it be more reasonable to suggest that the human body is the result of purposeful design by a great designer? The human body, it may be considered at 4 different levels. Now we can get into a health lesson. First, there are cells, representing the smallest unit of life. Second, there are tissues, muscle tissue, nerve tissue, etc., which are groups of the same kind of cells carrying on the same kind of activity. Third, there are organs, heart, liver, lungs, things like this, which are groups of tissues working together in harmony. Fourth, there are systems, reproductive systems, circulatory systems, respiratory systems, which are made up of groups of organs carrying out specific bodily functions. While we will not have the space to examine each of them in this context or in tonight, or even tomorrow or weeks, a brief look at the human body as a whole leads to the conclusion that there is intelligent design at work. The human body is composed of over 250 different kinds of cells: red blood cells, white blood cells, nerve cells, etc., totalizing approximately 100 trillion cells in the average adult. These cells come in different shapes and sizes and perform many different tasks. For example, certain cells like the male, spermatozoa cell, are so small, each only being 0.05 millimeters long, that 20,000 of them would fit inside the capital O from a standard typewriter. Some cells placed end to end would make only 1 inch if 6,000 of them were assembled together. Yet all these cells of the human body, if set end to end, would encircle the earth over 200 times. Even the largest cell of the human body, the female ovum, is unbelievably small, being only 0.01 inches of a diameter. Cells have 3 major parts. First, each cell has a cell membrane that surrounds it. Second, inside the cell is a 3-dimensional cytoplasm, a watery substance containing specialized organelles. Third, inside the cytoplasm is the nucleus that contains most of the genetic material and serves is the control center for the cell. The cell membrane is approximately 0.06 or 0.08 of a micrometer thick, yet allows selective transport into and out of each cell. Inside the cytoplasm, there are over 20 different chemical reactions occurring at any one time, with each cell containing 5 major components for communication, waste disposal, nutrition, repair, and reproduction. And we're running out of time here, but long story short, without going into that even more, how could that be random? How could our bodies not be the product of intelligent design? And like I said, I could go on for a while with that. But the atheists, those that believe in the evolutionary concepts, they want us to believe that. They want us to believe that this earth in the universe just happened. That these bodies, they evolved from various things. But clearly the evidence states otherwise, and that's where we're going to have to close it out for tonight. Next week, we'll get into, we'll finish that train of thought and then actually getting into the existence of God and looking at the morality aspect. And I hope to see you all back next week. Thank you.